Where's the love? Where's the love? It's right here in the heart of the city. I'm Silas Grant, and I got my man with me, my
Yo,
Brazilian
yo.
man with
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Boa noche. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You know, hey, you see what I'm doing too.
I see. You did
know,
that
I'm
on
doing a little
purpose, huh?
Saga jersey and all that. I'm a
Okay.
changed man. I told you I was gonna come back a bit different, man. You know what I'm
Uh,
saying? It happened. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But I'm happy to be back in the way. Missing Brazil though, bro.
yeah.
Had an incredible time, man.
It
Incredible
looked like
time.
it. It looked like
Yeah,
it
bro.
was good.
On multiple levels. You know what I'm saying? Like, and the craziest thing about, like, bro, no matter where we go, like, we us, man. You know what I'm saying? You see us. You know what I mean? You might can't speak, you know, it may be a language barrier or whatever, but like, bro, for real, black people, man, we magic no matter where we at, son.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really a beautiful. I'm so glad for my children and having an experience with my mother-in-law and Jessica. And, you know, it also helped me understand. You know, I've been around them 13 years at this point, you know. But going there even helped me understand my wife, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-laws, my extended family on her side even more. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was cool, bro.
That's
real.
cool. That's cool,
Yeah,
man. Also got a chance to see you Saturday at Angel's Cookout.
Yeah, man. Shout out to the queen of the spices. You know what I'm saying? That was what it always is. You know what I'm saying? Definitely was a beautiful time. We to see community come together like that. And you know, one of the things, I know we talked about this a bit, but bro, like, and I made the little reference to the Rock Nation, our version of the Rock Nation brunch. But I think, like, it's amazing the range of people that comes to this event.
Yeah, yeah.
And people that's doing all kind of remarkable things. But like when you in that backyard, what you do is just unimportant. It's all about everybody just there to celebrate her and to connect with other people, like on a real level, not like connecting on like a, you know, in a DC, you know what I'm saying, like that sort of DC networking way, which is, you know, but it was just really just about having a good time. I always enjoy it. That's one of my favorite days of the year. You know what I'm saying? Every year, bro.
I promised Dre from On Us Tees that I would say this on the show, because he asked if we were to talk about it to say this, but he described it as our Juneteenth celebration, which I thought was a good way to describe it, right?
I think that's perfect.
I think everything you just mentioned around celebrating her, putting down the guards, you know, just connecting in a real way, that's the real liberation, right? That's where the real relationships are built from there. So shout out to Dre for giving me that piece to share with everybody else. So
black excellence, opulence, decadence. That's what that be though.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, for real. So yeah, and happy birthday to Angel.
Yeah, definitely,
sure.
definitely. So today we are joined by another member of the council. I'm proud to say we making our rounds.
Hey man.
Yeah.
I have a majority.
Hey,
we got a quorum in here.
Yeah,
right?
man.
But we've been joined by the Ward 5 council member, our council member, right?
100%.
That represents our Ward 5, the Honorable Zachary Parker.
Sir.
Appreciate
Welcome to
y'all
Heart of
having
the
me.
City.
Thank you for having me.
Good.
I'll tell you, when I got the text, I was like, oh, I'd have made it. I made it.
Had to have you come through, man. So 2022, right?
Yes.
You get sworn in January 23, right?
Yep.
So you win the
The
election.
primary was June of 22.
22. And you were coming off being out the Ward 5 school board
member.
representative. Take us to that day when you win the primary. Coming from off the school board and knowing like the things, your priorities, what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But like, how did you feel that day?
June of 2022. I think at that time, honestly, it was a very long campaign. I mean no disrespect by this, but I looked at this recent campaign and it just seemed very even keel, if you will. And that campaign season in 2022 just seemed like it went on forever. It was very dramatic. It was dynamic, lots of ups and downs. And so honestly, at that point, I was just relieved that the campaign was coming to an end. And I had reached a level of peace that if I win, great. If I don't win, I will find another way to be a service. And I know that kind of sounds cliche, but genuinely, that's where I was at the end of the campaign. And I think my vision was around like, how do I manifest this idea of what I at the time was calling healthy communities, which is this ambiguous idea that everybody should be able to live in what you're talking about at the barbecue, like opulence and peace, have clean communities, their needs met. And I know that looks different across the city, and it looks different in Ward 5. Yeah. Like, we have communities where people are living in $1 million homes, and then we have communities where people's lights are being cut off and there's violence every day. And at the same time, I also realized that the ward was really divided. Given how dynamic the race was, there were so many candidates that I immediately felt the pressure after the election that, like, being, you know, tasked with leading the ward is one thing, but now you have to try to bring people together. So I would say for the last year and a half, it's been about trying to meet those two things. Like, how do you execute on this vision of advancing the life of everyday Washingtonians, trying to disrupt the cycle, as I call it, of the haves and the city prospering, and while also recognizing that I am one of the haves. I represent a segment of the city that is changing, that is gentrifying, in the sense that, you know, I wasn't born in the city. I didn't come from the communities in which I'm tasked with representing, but also recognizing that I now have to represent everybody, including those people that didn't vote for me, those people that were skeptical, honestly, and those people that may have seen the world and how to represent the ward on the council a little differently.
Yeah, which is a very interesting point in what you just said about, particularly, I guess it'd be any ward, but like Ward 5, I've always maintained that Ward 5, in my opinion, has like everything that the city has.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so I think being a council member of Ward 5, like you to your point, you really do have to like deal with like
Ward 5 is the heart of the city. I say that all the time.
It really is, man.
And it really is, I think, you know, the most dynamic place in the city, where you have just everything happening, but also where Ward 5 goes, I think that's where the city goes in a lot of ways, in terms of the energy, the drive, the focus, the movement. And fortunately, I was able to tap into that, but it also comes with a great responsibility.
Sure, I bet.
One of the things that he and I joke about offline about Ward 5, I often say it in this way, like, that's the big boy league, right? Like, that's the big leagues, politically, right?
Yeah.
And you coming in as the school board rep, you served in that role for 4 years, and then there was a point where it felt like you were going to take that step, right? Talk about giving.
Can I say this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know people would never believe this. They would never. I think some people think there was some master plan from day one. I'm gonna serve on the school board in order to get here, and I'm gonna serve here to get there. And it was not that calculated for me.
Okay.
My background, I'm an educator, so I was a teacher, not in the city. But I, for about 8-9 years, worked at an education nonprofit where I was working with DCPS and charter schools across the city, schools like Dunbar, Langdon, in Ward 5. So I felt like I knew a more intimate level of the ward, because you're engaging with parents, you're engaging with students and the communities around them. So when I ran for the school board, it was, for me, a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I run? I did not, at the time, believe it or not, have an appreciation for how political it was. For me, it was, I'm an educator, and I have something to offer on this board, and I was immediately thrust in this, I don't even know what to call it, but I was immediately in this political war zone that I had to quickly react to and wise up to. So, you know, I say the names like Theo Brown and Bob King, and y'all, you know,
we know,
the old guard Ward 5 folk that have been around for a long time that kind of schooled me. and I knew nothing. At that time, I don't even know if I really appreciated how the council functioned. I didn't realize how the school board was seen. I genuinely thought the school board had more authority at the time than it actually did. But I also know me as a person, I'm hyper focused. So if I set my goal on something, that is what I'm gonna get done. And over time, I also just believe that wherever you're planted at that time, if you give your all to it, and this again sounds cliche, but it is real, regardless of what that thing is, I feel like life opens up to you. So even running for council was not in the cards. And then I started getting calls from some of those same Ward 5 folks saying, well, Kenyan's not going to run again, and you should run. And at that time, it just kind of opened up the door for other conversations. I say repeatedly, if Kenyon would have ran again for Ward 5 Council, I probably would not have run because it just wasn't even in the thought process at that time.
So you said something that where I was going, right?
Yeah.
At that point when you were getting an appreciation for Ward 5 as a, this political sort of like mountain, right? What was in your mind like the biggest shock or the moment where you were like, oh, this is a lot more than I realized? Was there a moment?
There was a moment. It was a Ward 5 Dems meeting that people told me, okay, you need to go to the Ward 5 Dems meeting. So I went, not really knowing what to anticipate. And I realized, like, oh, these people are serious. Like, this is, like, real politics. This isn't about, like, let me serve on the school board. At the time, Jeanette Mobley was chairing the Ward 5 Dems, and immediately I realized that I was in a different league, to your point, that this was much deeper than I think I appreciated before. As a person of faith, as a person that comes from a God-fearing family, I feel like I'm in the place I'm supposed to be, and that there were other forces at play.
That's it.
Because there's no other way to justify that nobody, essentially, in the political world would be able to walk into this meeting, connect with the right people, and that's literally how it happened. I met this one person that would connect me to this another person that would connect me to this other person, and then now you have a team, and then you kind of build momentum for there, and yeah, that's essentially how so I don't want to make it seem like it was a fluke, but in many ways it wasn't this master plan that I think some people perceive it to be.
Yeah. But I guess to follow up on that, though, you talked about the vision you had, and I would imagine that in those, I meet this person introduces me to the next person, that somehow you were putting together the vision in a way where it was resonating, right? So talk a bit about crafting that vision and then communicating it, and how you were able to tweak it until you perfected it to win people over.
And that's because it was real, and it is real.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't anything that I even needed to perfect. I tell people all the time, like, I'm fortunate enough to have lived a life where I've had a lot of opportunities. I grew up in a family where it was a little bit of everything in one family. So my mom's side of the family is very solidly middle class, and everybody went to college, and this type of thing. And my father's side of the family is very different. And growing up, you're exposed to just a little bit of everything, from going to this meeting and in Chicago at the time, Rainbow Push meetings. And so that advocacy and organization was ingrained in me. That's just who we were as, just like growing up as people. At the same time, I see and I saw the struggle in my own family. My brother, it's three of us. I'm the youngest. My middle brother passed away in 2016. My oldest brother lives a very different life than me. And by that meaning, same parents, same household, same values, but my parents had him at 18. They had me at 30 plus. Right. So they could afford me a different life than they could afford him. And I see my brother living paycheck to paycheck. I see my brother not being able to take time off from work because for him, that represents not getting paid. I see the struggles he has caring for his daughter, my niece. And so when I talk about education, when I talk about opportunity, I'm thinking about my own family and how I've seen like things work out for me that don't even work out for my own brother. And it's very real for me.
Yeah, condolences on you, bro.
I appreciate
too,
that.
man. So growing up in Chicago, and you know, which is a political town.
It's a different
It's
world.
You know what I'm saying?
I tell everybody,
You know,
DC is tough, but Chicago is a different world.
Right,
like,
right.
in terms of politics.
Politics, yeah, no, I get it, but
and not necessarily in a good way.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So coming up in that, and then you go Northwestern, right?
Yes.
So that's in Chicago, and then you go to Columbia.
Yes.
All right. And then you teach in.
But I wanted to go to Howard, and again, so at the time,
for what, undergrad or
no,
grad?
undergrad.
Okay.
So
okay.
I went on a college tour, senior year of high school. At the time, me and all of my closest friends, we were applying to Howard. We went on a college tour. We went to the dorms. The guys stay over here, the girls stay over there.
Yeah.
And I came to DC on this college tour, and they snuck us out. And we went to this party, and it was, growing up in Chicago in a sheltered family, like this is amazing. Like, I need to get to DC. This is how y'all going to college. And I was just sold at the time. My father passed away in my senior year of high school. And so it just changed everything. And I got accepted to Northwestern. And so for a long time, it was me debating, am I going to go to Howard or Northwestern? Fast forward, Northwestern is a great school. I ultimately decided to go there to be closer to my mom and family and all that good stuff. But I feel like, as I reflect back on life, there was something drawing me to DC even then, and maybe it just wasn't the right time for me to be in DC. Fast forward, after going to grad school, teaching, I ended up moving to DC in 2013, and this provides me a perspective, because at that time I was one of those people that cared deeply about politics in the world, and you would have asked me and I would have said I'm deeply engaged, but I knew nothing, nor did I care to really know about DC government and how it operated. Right. So those people that you say go to the polls and just vote for any, mini, mighty, mo, or the name they see, I was one of those people when I first got to the city, which again just offers me a different perspective about, there are so many people in this city that could be mobilized, that care deeply about these issues, could be plugged in, if only elected leaders reach out to them, can speak their language, can, engage them, all this good stuff.
So I wanted to talk a bit about your time teaching. You taught in New Orleans before, so I know you said coming here to work for that's when you came here to work for the nonprofit, right?
Yes.
In your time teaching, though, right? In New Orleans, again, we talked about here, Chicago, and New Orleans is a special place unto itself, right? What did you learn from those students and those families in New Orleans that you carry with you? Not that you carry with you to the nonprofit, that you carry with you to the school board, and that you carry with you on the dais at the council? Like, what did you learn in that period?
That is a great question. I taught 7th grade math in New Orleans. I taught in a trailer behind a dilapidated school, and I lived in a community where they still had the X's on doors after Hurricane Katrina to represent where individuals were found in the house. Like, that was just the way of life in New Orleans as the city was rebuilding. And I think the number one thing I learned from my students was like this resilient attitude that everything around you is destroyed. Some of my students lost literally everything, and yet there was still a level of peace and just go-get-itness that they had, that I still kind of reflect on, because it's easy when life is lifing or things are just happening that, you can get stuck there. And there's a need to kind of just push through some of that. I would also say, like, I got to see for the first time at a system level a lot of kids that represented my brother, in the sense that they were failed by the education system. So I was teaching 7th graders who, at the time, I had to teach how to do addition, subtraction, basic, multiple, in 7th grade.
Yeah.
I was getting directives from my principal at the time that we can't fail them, but you gotta, and so it just kind of opened my eyes to like, oh, I see how this works. And and just kind of shifted my life in the sense that from there on, I was kind of focused on education. Because when I went to Northwestern originally, I was pre-med, and I only did Teach for America, or I taught as kind of like, all right, let me do this for 2-3 years as a opportunity to give back, especially to New Orleans after the storm. And that kind of changed my life in terms of just feeling like there was something I could offer, not only to them, but just, to education in general. So
it feels like, at least here in D.C., and I can imagine it is this way in other cities, that people who don't have the direct experience you have expect the kids to overcome the way you describe the kids overcoming in New Orleans, right? And while that is an incredible thing, it's not often the standard, and I don't know that it should be. And I'm wondering, like, the lens that you look at it through, right, having seen that, but knowing that those situations were normally insurmountable, how do you explain to somebody who's not directly involved in it that, hey, yeah, we got some superheroes that are in the classroom, but we got to give grace to those who may not be able to get over the hurdle?
That's real. And I would say overcome is a strong word. So, like, what I saw was a student on any given day being resilient, having joy, finding peace in that moment, even though everything was going wrong around them. I can't tell you how many of my former students I've heard have been killed, or I've gotten funeral notices about. So I wouldn't say they all necessarily overcome, but there is something that when all hell is breaking loose, and or you're going to school in a trailer, you're living in a house or a shack with no power, and if you could still laugh and find peace and still kind of push, there's something to learn from that in a way that I think we kind of lose touch with. What I would say here in DC, it's all connected. There's so many. The most heartbreaking thing I think I've encountered is when you look at a class of kids that are being failed academically and they have no clue. And you see that everybody's just going through the motions. We're just doing school because this is what we do. And you can kind of guesstimate how many of those kids are going to make it out, quote unquote, are going to graduate, are going to go on to, accomplish their goals. And it's just heartbreaking to think that we are allowing this in school after school, city after city. So anyway, I won't get on that soapbox.
But it ain't
and I will say this about Teach for America. I have a lot of critiques of the organization. A lot of people do. It's a controversial organization in the sense that I think it has this this gentrifying reputation that these newcomers are coming into this community and pushing out old-timer educators. But and some of that, I think Teach for America definitely stands to be criticized, but I think the greatest gift is they introduce a lot of people that otherwise would not be connected to education to the crisis that is happening right before everybody's eyes, that not enough people are paying attention.
Because it is a crisis.
It is a crisis.
And when you look at our numbers, I saw something that was saying only like 8% of high school students in DCPS are proficient in math. And like maybe 26% of them are proficient in reading. And then we think we look at, all of us have been, marred by the uptick in juvenile crime.
That's right.
And not enough people. I just see kind of like that parallel, But even on the adult side of things, that's, for those of us that have been in that work for so long, like you get that. You understand the failure of our education systems, right? That really help play a role in where people end up as it relates to being justice involved. You know what I'm saying? And education is incredibly vital, important. Man. Incredibly important.
And we all say that, and I think most people believe that. But I also think most people think our schools are doing well. I think people think their kids are doing well, but then when you look at it, we are graduating so many kids that can't read proficiently, that can't perform academically, and this isn't in some type of like, I'm not saying everybody needs to go on to college and or do X, Y, and Z in order to be successful, but I am saying we need to prepare kids to have a choice, have an option of doing what they want to do once they leave out our classrooms. And it's just not happening.
And it's probably like, I mean, this can be said, you know, from a national lens as well. But when we talk about a hyper local thing in this city, whether a kid goes to college or not, you have to be able to compete, right?
That's right.
You know what I mean? It's particularly when you look at DC as being probably one of the, you know, most educated places in the world, you know, where brilliant minds flock here for opportunity. The standard here is just different. You know, I don't care if you working in Starbucks or Chick-fil-A or, you know, just let me just say retail.
What do you mean by that? It's
meaning,
different.
Meaning that the standard of who you have to be hired, because the when you got Howard students, Georgetown students, GW students, Catholic students going after, you know, even jobs in the in-between time, you know, the standard is just higher. So if a young person, you know, 11th grade, 12th grade, or right out of high school can't read, can't write, can't articulate themselves, you know what I mean? The competition is too high. Like we have to understand that the landscape here, the playing field here is just like some of the highest competition. And so, and even going into things like trades, right? It's a myth that you almost like, okay, you can go into the trade. Like if you're not quote unquote smart enough to go to college, you can just go to the trades. That's a myth. You in order to do any of the trades, you have to be good in math. You have to, you know what I'm saying? Like it's not.
That concept.
Yes, absolutely. And these apprenticeships have entry exams, right? Like I'm watching people, young and older people, you know, fail the entry exam to get into these apprenticeships. Yeah. So again, I'm just trying to tease out how important it is that we don't just push people through, that we
don't push.
Yes.
And that is exactly what's happening.
Yeah, man.
And I continue to think we need to have a deeper analysis of what's happening in the city, and not just in DC, but across the country, where we're seeing juvenile crime go up. But what do we anticipate? What do we expect young people to do if they are not able to retain a job, or they are not able to make a living for themselves? They are going to turn to the streets oftentimes. And that's not to say that's okay and excuse
not
it,
a justification,
but it is to say that it is short-sighted for us to think we can only lock up kids as our answer to fix the problem. We have to get in front of it, and I think that starts in our schools. Because by middle school, many of our young people are already starting to go down that path that's going to end them up dead or in jail, sadly.
You mentioned something, you know, you teach in 7th grade, right? You going into that classroom, a young black man from Chicago going into another urban environment in New Orleans. You know, what's your take on, you know, and you mentioned Teach for America as well. So some of these pipelines for new teachers, and a lot of the teachers being young and white, you know what I'm saying? Young and white and female in a lot of cases, right? How much is that ability to create buy-in and rapport? How important is that in our school buildings? And do you see that enough? Do you feel like we need more black males in the classroom?
We definitely need more black males. We definitely need more black educators, but especially black male educators. And the rapport is essential, because if I can't see who you are as my student, how can I really educate you? Like, you know, there were so many young people that I had a opportunity to teach that you are not reaching them by just saying, we're going to learn this today. Like there's so much trauma that some of our young people are dealing with. And that is something I had to learn, that it's not just so much I need to teach you this math lesson. It's like, how can I help put you on the right path to even caring about school? And granted, some people would say, well, that's not your job as an educator, but it is our job. It's all of our jobs. And so to your point about like the connectedness to communities and schools, I think that is essential. And I would say I've seen some young teachers be some of the best teachers in a school. I've seen young teachers, even some white teachers, be some of the teachers that's staying until 10, 11 o'clock because they care that much. But I do think it's essential that there's this connective tissue between like the teacher that's standing up in front of the class and the kids that they're teaching. So, yeah.
So at this point, you're now the 4th of 5 black men that are elected for the council that have been in this room and sat with us. And in every conversation we've had thus far with black men that are elected on the council, we've talked a bit about what it is to sort of, I guess, unzipping the jacket a bit and show who you truly are, right? Dealing with issues like crime and education as black men who've lived in inner cities, also worked in inner cities, have these long-lasting relationships, you have a different lens through which you look, right? The crime bill, all these sort of things we're dealing with. And I'm wondering,
what's the crime bill?
What's the crime bill?
Secure DC.
I know it. I know it. I'm just always fat. But when you say the crime bill, what is the crime bill? It's the public safety bill.
Public safety bill.
Yes.
You know what?
The omnibus.
Look, I should know better than that.
No, I'm
safety
joking.
bill.
I'm joking.
But no, I mean,
but we got a lot of flack. I got a lot of flack about supporting that bill.
Right.
And I just, everything we said aside, I say all the time, like, policy making exists at this connection between idealism and realism.
Mm-hmm.
And on the idealism side, I want a world where we're not locking people up and we can think outside of this carceral approach. On the realism side, there's a 13-year-old with an automatic weapon that just held up somebody's grandmother. What do you do? What do you do? Or there are communities in Ward 5 and across the city, many of them black, many of them lower income, that are plagued with violence, and neighbors, leaders from those communities are pleading for help. What do you do?
Yeah.
So the tension is fighting for that idealistic view of the DC that is possible and while dealing with what we're seeing play out in the streets. And I am not, nor was I, mistaken that this bill was going to fix all our problems.
Right.
I do think, though, especially gun violence in the city, if you if you commit violence, cause harm to your community, especially communities that are plagued with violence, I think you have to be held accountable. Yeah. A lot of that was conflated, where people were saying, "Oh, we're just trying to lock people up." It's not about that, because actually I think, improved the bill a lot from when it was first introduced, but also needed to kind of address certain tensions in our system in terms of holding people accountable.
But I mean, as far as your personal experiences are concerned, right? You look at folks in your family, folks from Chicago, folks in classrooms where you've taught. Is it difficult to explain to someone who's not as close the experiences that you've had and why you stand on what you stand on when you have to make those kind of decisions?
Of course. It's always difficult. And I think we are just now, I was having this conversation earlier, we're now in this world where a lot of people are just talking past each other. Oftentimes, especially in elected office, people are trying to be heard, and I get it. I don't know how often those conversations are productive. But for me, I've been exposed to a lot of different sides of a lot of different things. And I can see many debates from a lot of different angles, from my own experience, from my family's experience, from my students' experience, from different cities and places I've lived and been. And it makes me want a deeper analysis and critique of what we're doing. But at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. Where are you going to be on this side or that side? And that is a constant tension for anybody in elected office. If I could say one more thing, I also think there just needs to be greater space for black men in particular to focus on our mental health, to focus on our overall health and well-being. And I don't know if we are always afforded that space publicly, in families, in friend circles. I think if you're lucky, you are. But what I encounter for me, in my family and my friend groups, that space often doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's real. That's real, bro. I mean, and I think it plays out in everywhere we are, right? At work, at home,
Absolutely.
in the community, you know what I mean? Like that lack of like space.
And that plays out for a lot, black women too. But I think black women, in my experience, They found spaces to have those conversations,
Yeah.
and people have created spaces for Black women to have those conversations, which is so important and necessary. And I think we just have more work to do there on the for Black men.
And I brought up the public safety bill because you and I talked about this on this show, but also offline. We saw it in the faces of the Black men on that dais considering that bill.
Yes.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
You could see, like, man, I understand this differently than anybody else because
Yes.
I'm a Black man,
Yes.
right? And to your point, the wellness piece, it was weighing on y'all. We could see it through the
Yes.
television.
And we
Right,
said
it was
that,
very
we just were
clear.
like, damn, yeah.
You know, but like you said, that crossroad of he's 13, he's got an automatic weapon, but he also represents all the other Black men who were failed
That's
in
right.
other ways.
And
too.
Well, he that seventh grader you taught.
That's right. And I can see, like, this is where you are now, but I can only imagine where you were failed before this point.
Yeah.
And there was pain. And we expressed that. We had those conversations. But again, I just think what often gets lost is nuance, but also that personal connection to community in these conversations. So very quickly, as a city, the city was under siege last year in many respects, and we had to do something. The council felt like we had to do something. The city was calling on us to do something, and people were having a visceral reaction for us even having conversations about young people's mental health or how they have been failed in school. That, oh, you all are making excuses for them. And so it just didn't even allow for some of that nuanced conversation that was necessary. But
No doubt. So I was thinking, right? I'm sitting here, I'm thinking like, damn, like that's the heaviness of being in those roles. I think people take, public office. I think they take it lightly, right? When in a way, when it's like, especially I think sometimes even people that want to be in those roles, right? They just think I don't think they get the largeness of it, the gravity of it. What has been like your biggest challenge as a council member? Since you've been in the role, or the thing that you didn't anticipate that you've had to deal with it the most.
Last year, which was my first year, was very difficult.
Why it seem like you've been? Oh yeah, okay. Sorry.
It seems like I've been, but I've only been in the role for a year and a half.
Been a lot going
but last
on.
year was a very difficult year. If you can imagine, I got sworn in on a Tuesday, I believe. That Friday, Karan Blake got killed. And it just seemed like there was a domino, and every month there was something happening in the ward, from mass shootings to dogs drowning on Rhode Island to fires to bears running around Brooklyn. It just seemed seemed like bizarre incident. I joked with the mayor and said, "You must have like what's going on in Ward 5?" But anyway, I think what was the most difficult, and still remains the most difficult, is when you have to, as an elected representative, engage with a grieving family.
Yes, indeed.
I still don't have the words. They feel empty. But at the same time, I know my connecting with the family is so important. And the heartbreak of a mom crying because they've lost their son, or a family distraught because of some traumatic incident, that is and has been the most difficult. And those are the moments where after it's like it weighs on your mental health. And last year, I can't tell you how many families, parents I had to engage with to just comfort them. And I'm not saying, my pain won't compare to theirs, but they don't prepare you for that. Nobody prepare. When you're running for office, you think about you sitting up on the dais passing bills. You don't think about that real connection with people that are suffering probably some of the greatest losses of their lives.
Man.
I watched online on what was formerly Twitter, now X. I watched people.
It'll forever be Twitter, by the way.
Technically I still call it that, right?
It's a fact.
But I noticed, man, 11:59 a.m. January 2nd, it was like, all right, before you get sworn in, they're all in your corner supporting what you're going to do. 12 p.m. January 2nd. Zachary, why haven't you done something yet?
Yeah.
When are you going to do something? And to your point, that Friday when that incident took place, I saw people like online saying, "Hey,
Absolutely.
what's going on?" And I guess my question to you is, I know the valve cuts on, but did you anticipate that
No.
it would be that much pressure?
No, and there's no training.
Yeah.
There's no manual. There's like literally you are the council member and you are kind of navigating even to the point of like, all right, what do you do in this moment? And that incident was it wasn't just a killing in the ward, as you know. That was a very volatile incident where the community was just at its wits end, and it just remains very difficult.
Yeah.
It remains very difficult. I hope that I've shown up enough for people to recognize my authenticity in those moments, because all I know how to be is me. And so, I've sat in living rooms where moms are crying. I've gone to funerals, and those, it's not all negative, but those are the times where it just nothing you say or do feels like it's enough.
So obviously you can't do it alone. You've got a full office, right?
Yep.
And we know the official titles, right? Chief of Staff, Senior Advisor, that sort of thing. But I want you to walk us through a bit around the characteristics you wanted in your hires, right? I need this kind of person. I need that kind of person. Not the titles,
Yeah.
but the characteristics. What were you looking for?
It's funny you asked that, because I was very intentional with hiring a team, and I was also thinking about those two things I mentioned earlier, like how do I execute this vision that people elected me on while at the same time bridging the ward that is very diverse, that kind of spans the gamut. And so I wanted people that grew up in Ward 5, because I didn't. And I wanted people that kind of reflected different aspects of the ward. And so my first team member was my chief of staff, who grew up in Ward 5 as a native, went to school in Ward 5. And we have built a rapport that, like, she kind of schools me on. I school her on the politics of things, because she's kind of distant to the politics, if you will. At the same time, she kind of connects me to the real Ward 5, that, this is where this used to be. This is how we used to do this. This is what this means. And that was very important to me, to be able to speak to the folk that perhaps were skeptical, the folk that wanted to see someone from the community in that role. As a Black woman, as an educator, also we have a lot in common that we connect and bond on. My deputy chief of staff, and at the time another one of my constituent service coordinators, grew up in Ward 5. And so not just DC, but in Ward 5. And that was really important. So out of the 17 members I hired, 3 of them grew up in the ward, 2 of them Black, 1 of them white. And I just think that allowed me, and has allowed me, to connect to different facets of our community. And it was important for me to get people in the right seat. And I preach this all the time. We have this saying in my office: feedback is love. And so I get feedback, they get feedback, we give each other feedback, because I never want to get to a point where I know it all, or someone feels comfortable like, I just got it. I've been in this office for now a year and a half. I just got it. And so I tried to hire people to be in the right seats. And yeah, I hope, it seems like the feedback we're getting from the ward is for the most part positive. But those, I would say, would be the 2 things, like the expertise they bring, and for those that could, a connection to the ward.
Just personal privilege real quick.
Yeah,
Shout
yeah.
out to Oliver Stout too.
Shout out to man.
He definitely,
Yeah.
like, every time I reach out to him about something, he responds. And the response is not just the standard. It's like, I'm giving you excellence when I respond to you. So we appreciate that.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
No, but it's
Oliver
true.
is a gift in many ways, and I tell him that all the time. Like, Oliver is the person that's gonna go over and beyond,
Facts.
and is not gonna do it because he wants the recognition.
Yeah.
And it's important for him to hear that people see and recognize that.
Now we see you,
Yeah, we see. And
for
and
real.
one conversation we had that I laughed at, when you all were in transition, he reached out to me. He was like, "This is demanding? Is it a demanding job?" And I was like, "Yeah, Oliver, it's definitely a demanding job."
sounds like
and
Oliver,
he
too.
called it real fast, but nah, definitely, like, I can reach out to him with anything, and he like, "I got you."
Ain't
we
gonna get
appreciate
back
that.
to you.
And
Dude, you know what I'm saying? He gonna get
Really,
back to
that
you.
is his function in office. It doesn't matter what. If I say, Oliver, come on, we got to go. We got an emergency. Like, he's like, let's go. And I appreciate that out of all of my team members, but him in particular, because you need those people that just have a love for people and want to do a good job.
Yeah.
And in the seat that they're in.
Yeah,
So.
for sure. So what has been, what's been the thing that you've done in this year and a half, that you the most proud of as a council member, particularly legislatively? Like, what are the, let's give us two. What are your two things you the most proud of?
I will say this budget, we got past a child tax credit. And that was really important because, again, I know how important it is to set young people up for success. And during the height of the pandemic, we saw that federal child tax credit made a deep impact on a lot of families' lives. I think at that time, families were getting up to $3,500 a kid.
Yeah.
It literally transformed some families. If you got 2-3 kids and you were getting $3,500 for one, it put families on a different trajectory. And it was the first policy in about 50, 60 years that slashed child poverty rates in this country by double digits. And so we got that passed in the district. We still have to scale it, but that is a big victory. And I think, this is a small win, but I think it's leading to a bigger win. This year we got a study done for Rhode Island Avenue. When I look at Rhode Island Avenue in Ward 5, I just see all the potential. You have this corridor in the heart of the ward that is underinvested in, underdeveloped, and the study is going to allow the Office of Planning to tell us essentially what are opportunities for us to kind of invest in this corridor. And so there's a lot of talk about downtown, and yeah, that's important. I don't want to minimize that, but we cannot forget the heart of the city, the wards, the people that live on corridors like Rhode Island Avenue, and I think that's a big opportunity.
And in that study, is that going from, 6th Street?
It's focused
New
on
Jersey
12th
Avenue,
and
North-
Rhode Island to
Oh.
the border of the city.
To East Avenue.
That's
Yeah.
right. So
Okay.
if you ever go to the Maryland side of Rhode Island Avenue, you will see like they have a robust arts district. They
Yeah.
have restaurants, and it immediately ends when you get to DC. And when you get to Ward 5, the sign is falling apart, the grass isn't cut, and I just think we could do a lot better than that. And so that's going to pave the way, I think, in these next few years for a deeper investment in that corridor.
And I often see people not show enough appreciation for studies.
Yeah.
People will say, "Oh, we study," but the things that come out of that justify the actions you take next. And if we don't have those studies first, then you can't really justify that. So I just wanted to make that note that
Yeah, I think that's
people will
important.
see you did that and be like, "Oh, that's not enough," but that's a part of the process.
Yeah, people don't understand.
Yeah, I will say I am one of those people. Before getting to the council, I was one of those people like, let's just do it. Like, why do we have to study reparations? Let's just do it. But I think it is important to study because you have to have that record. You have to answer the questions before they come, and government moves in a very deliberate way, and that those case studies often allow for the work to actually happen.
Yeah.
I've learned that over this past year and a half. So.
Speaking of the way that government normally works, right? We talked about Ward 5 and it being the big leagues and a different sort of animal, right? William Spalding, Harry Thomas Sr., Vincent Orange Sr., Harry Thomas Jr., Kenyon McDuffie. Like, you're following like some household names.
That's right.
And there's probably, not even probably, I know there are people that expect you to do things the way they did it, right? And you
Yes.
talked about being introduced to the right people and making those connections. But can you talk about a moment or times where you got to push back and be like, no, I'm Zachary Parker. I don't do it the way they've done it.
Less about my predecessors, but there are times you just have to push back on people and just trust that the vision you have is the right vision, and people entrusted you in this role for that vision. I take with great weight that, what am I, the sixth council member for the ward, and DC is a relatively young government
For sure.
and each of the council members that preceded me I have big shoes to fill in different respects. I would say the strength I have is that I really see I'm a bridge builder for the future of DC and the future of Ward 5. So we're at this pivotal point where the ward is changing, the district is changing, and given like my unique background and experiences, I'm able to kind of navigate in many different spaces and talk to many different constituencies in a way that we can all move forward together. And in that, I think you have to push back on people. Namely, I'm trying to find the artful way to put it. Like, there are people that have lived in Ward 5 in DC all their lives, and they've been in these communities 50, 60, 70 years. At the same time, you have newer residents who have come in and they have hopes and dreams. And those two realities come at attention oftentimes.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that, we're experiencing that now with South Dakota Avenue or a proposed bus route on First Street in Bloomingdale. And it's in those times that you have to kind of, I don't want to say play peacemaker, but kind of push back on the demands and kind of chart a path to say, we are neighbors, we're going to get through this together, and we're going to honor the people who have been in these communities for 50, 60, 70 years. I think there is a role for that. So I hope I answered your question, but I think if I had to say, like, have I had to push back on being like my predecessors? Not so much, but I have had to push back on the demands of different constituencies at the cost of other constituencies.
Got it. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, and I could just imagine with this city has become so much more cosmopolitan than the city we grew up in. And even if you talk about the one or two generations before us, right? It's incredibly, cosmopolitan compared to even though they're here, but they grew up in a time, right? And so sometimes people just kind of in their mind, the world has remained like it was, right? So helping people to say, and we even go through this a lot, I think, in our roles in the city of trying to say, I acknowledge what you're saying, and I'm acknowledging you, and I'm acknowledging that maybe this particular situation ain't right, but how we move the needle today is a little different than what it was prior to. I even actually was talking about just sort of like increasing our adaptability, right? Yesterday on my gram, just because that's on me a lot, because I see that. But as the leader in our ward, and you talk a lot about serving and bringing neighbors together.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you, though? Like, how do we continue to do? What's the best route in doing that, into making everybody feel seen, right? Because I think that falls at your feet. Like, how do you make every demographic feel like you see them?
I mean, I've been trying to do it. I think it's showing up as authentically and intentionally as possible. Trying to give equal weight to different neighborhoods. I'll use Carver Langston, a part of the ward that needs more love, frankly, that for decades has been underinvested in. And that's why I'm showing up at block parties. That's why we are fighting in the budget for parks in Carver Langston, because I just think I feel that weight that I have to be the council member for all Ward 5 residents, not just where I can trust the votes are going to be high. If I could go back and just say something, I think people have to be in community with one another. And it goes back to what you were saying about Angel's birthday. Like, people are not, they live by each other. We're in communities with each other, but people are not always in community with each other. I can't tell you how many neighbors say, oh, my neighbors don't even speak, or this person, I just, that is also what I'm trying to work on, is like, how do we create the space where folk can just connect and be in community with one another. So Ward 5 Day, which was a tradition that Harry Thomas Sr. started, which was also a way of me honoring one of my predecessors, is an opportunity for Ward 5 neighbors to come together. We're going to do it again this year.
You got a date on that?
It's going to be in August.
Okay,
I'll get you the
okay.
date. But we have been trying to do these intentional opportunities to just get people that ordinarily would not connect with one another, or ordinarily wouldn't speak with one another, to just be in one space and realize that, oh, we have a lot in common. And because I think the minute you know the person across from you, you're less likely to talk reckless on Twitter, curse them out at a community meeting, and you would just be more readily available to engage with them. And we just have a lot of work to do in that space across the city, but in Ward 5.
You know, a word I hear you use, and maybe it's not just you, but I hear a couple of y'all on the council use this word, but I hear you use this word a lot. And I don't know if maybe I'm just being hyper aware or like listening differently today, because it's just shocked. But when you use the word neighbor,
Yeah.
right? Right. I mean, I think to me that's deep, and I know that's not just by accident though, right?
It's not.
You know what
It's
I'm
not.
saying? To like, resident, you would hear that a lot, or you know what I'm saying? But to hear the word neighbor is different, because it's like to me anyway. It makes me think like, oh yeah. So whether you live on Hanover or in Trinidad or Carver or in Rosedale or Edgewood or wherever. Yeah, we neighbors.
It's funny you say that, because Molly the other day, we live like 4 blocks from my mother. So she asked me, she was like, she calls her Shuggy. She said, is Shuggy our neighbor?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, she lives like 4 blocks from us. So like, yeah, she is our neighbor, right?
Right.
We're there a lot. We know a lot of the neighbors that are on that block. I grew up there. So it was funny you just said that, because it made me think about, I'm trying to now shape her definition
Yes.
of it.
Concept of
Yes.
what, yeah.
And
Because it goes back to that idea that we all want pretty much the same things.
100%.
And if we stop talking past each other and can be in community with each other, see each other as neighbors, we may not always agree. But I've seen when it's done well, neighbors who have a deep respect for one another, who are on opposite sides of an issue. And we can shake hands and say we disagree and just keep it moving. And it doesn't always have to turn out to like some bad faith kind of fight between neighbors. I just think that is a toxic element that has creeped into the city's politics. I think social media allows for that to kind of fester, because you can have keyboard courage and say whatever you want, as long as you don't have to encounter the person. And it doesn't force you to move beyond your assumptions, because you're going to be right.
Yeah.
So, as long as I can conclude, Tony is who I say he is, I don't have to challenge my assumptions about who you really are.
Yeah, for sure. And if I'm your neighbor, it speaks to us having something that we share, right? And I have some concern about what happens to you, because if something happens to you, it happens to me.
And we have a linked fate. Yes,
that's a fact.
Yes,
so that's powerful to me. Like I've thought about that. Like I'm like, dang, yeah, I hear you say that a lot. You know what I'm saying? I just be like, or even when you write, things that you
and
post.
That
like,
honestly, I think separates my view of politics from maybe some others. That it's not just about winning. Like some people's definition of politics is let's just win. Let's win on this argument. Let's win this vote. Let's win this election. But if you view people as your neighbor, especially if you're their elected representative, you're going to engage them differently. You're going to care for them differently. You're going to represent them differently. And that's going to piss people off along the way. But I just hold true that I am tasked with being a representative for nearly 90,000 residents. Yeah. And it doesn't allow me to just be only responsive to a certain constituency in the ward. Yeah.
So you talked a lot about the future of the city and the future of Ward 5 in particular. And I think about the fact that, quite honestly, we stole you from Chicago, right? You came here and you've added value to our city. a lot of our kids end up leaving here because people don't often see the value in them here, right? So there's like this interesting dynamic where we see value in people from other places, but we don't often see the value of the people that are actually here. He and I mentor a young man who's lived in Florida, almost moved to Mexico, all these different places, but couldn't land the job here. An incredible guy, right? And I'm just wondering, have you thought about, and if so, how do we manage to edify and grow the young people with the greatest potential and then keep them here? That's a thought that I think about for the future, and I'm wondering if that's on your radar as well.
Yes, I would say. I would say that that focus is acutely necessary in DC. Like when I came to DC, I had never been somewhere where there was such pride in just being from the city. Like this idea of being a native Washingtonian, growing up in Chicago, you don't really hear people say, "Oh, I'm a native Chicagoan." It's just not a thing. But to your question, I think the need is that the city is going through a lot of transformation, and that there is a need for our young people, many of whom we're failing, to see opportunity and to give back to the city. And I think the answer there is exactly what you said: mentorship, and like how can you open up doors and give opportunity to people from the city. I think Wendell in Ward 7, and who's about to be Ward 7's next council member, Wendell from the city. Like that is going to represent something for young people in Ward 7, but especially young black men in Ward 7. They're going to look at him and say, oh, if he could do this, I could do this.
You know how I met him? I met him when he was a kid. He was standing outside the Giant selling candy.
That's sounds
how
about
I
right.
met him.
That sounds about right.
And then we did a March for Peace, and Joyce Robinson Paul reintroduced me to him.
Shout out to Joyce Robinson.
Yes, I just saw her.
Still holding it down. I saw her last night.
But she walked him up to our March for Peace, and I looked at him, and I'm like, I know you.
But I think that is how it has to happen. That, somebody opened the door for him, and maybe it was Joyce Robinson Paul or you all, and he's inevitably going to open up the door. And I think the more we can do that, as well as strengthen our education system, I think it's undoubtable that we'll continue to have that pipeline of leaders in the city. If I could say one other thing, I think there is a need for the history of the city to be preserved, and everything you're talking about, like how do we have more people invest in the city? There's so much that has already been invested that people have no clue about, including me. And I just look at some of the elders that are passing on, or just some of the traditions that we're moving away from. I hear people talk about the Georgia
Avenue Day.
Things like that seem insignificant, but that in 10, 15 years, like maybe nobody will talk about it anymore. And it just, going back to Ward 5 Day, like that meant a lot to a lot of people. When I was talking to Ward 5 neighbors, many of them were like, oh, I remember Ward 5 Day and we used to do X, Y, and Z. And so I just think in our small way, it's important for the city to kind of harken back to the legacy that made this city great, and that makes this city great.
No, and to that point, that's spot on. And I think this what I'm about to say, I think is very much tied to the strengthening of our schools as well. The adult stabilization particularly in the native black community is so imperative to ensure that our kids do well, to ensure that our traditions and our culture is preserved.
That's right.
Because culture is passed on by people. You know what I mean? Like it could be, we can do things obviously from a government standpoint to highlight things and to, make things better. But if the people that participate in the culture aren't present, it's gonna lose its soul.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in many things. That's why certain things have been able to just be like, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal, but it is. But if the people aren't there to say, no, it's important because of X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And I think the future of our city, if preserving, the culture that we grew up in is so important. But in preserving the culture and growing the culture too, I think is important too, right? Because what you said about the, really, I'm really been thinking about that, how important that is. That we, no matter how people may feel about gentrification and things of that nature, the reality of it is DC is different now.
DC is different.
Right? Full stop. Right? And we have to start operating from not what it was or not what you dreamed, but what it is. And how do we coexist? And I think you also mentioned everybody wanting the same things. If we don't focus on eradicating poverty,
That's right.
helping,
That's right.
especially Native Blacks. That's when you look at who's poor, when you
That's
look at
right.
who's down, when you look who kid going to jail, when you look who kid can't read, when you look who got infant mortality. It's the same families, right?
Yeah.
You going to them people's houses, sitting on their couch. And so it's like, and so I'm saying all that to say to the question about the opportunities for people like our mentee. How do we create more Wendell Felders? That really has to be like all of our collective goal.
That's right.
You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
Like, I think that should keep me up at night. I've talked to you before offline about just the importance of, I feel, about helping returning citizens get, into play, how much of an impact that would have. But I say all of that to say, do you think that we have the will to do that, right? Do you think that's doable?
I think we need the right leaders to make that happen. And by that, I mean, it needs to be intentional. It's not going to just happen. It's not going to happen because, to your point, DC has changed, and change is not always bad. Change sometimes can be good, but there's also a lot of, I'm thinking of certain communities that have been struggling for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And while DC is changing around them, those communities are not changing. And I think it's not just about the traditions and legacies, but how do we not leave a segment of the city behind and replace them and or their families with newcomers? Yeah. And that goes back to the conversation about education. So I think for me, it comes back to how do we elect, support, push, hold accountable our leaders to kind of make that happen, both economically, but also in where we give our attention to, our traditions, all that.
Sure.
I think it's all connected.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask you a question. We talk about leaders and all that, you guys have to deal with. And you even talked about like that space earlier, right? That we all need as black men, right? What do you do to decompress?
I was getting ready to ask you that.
You know what I mean? Where does that space? What that space look like for you? And you know what I mean? How, when you had them long days and when you long weeks or them big decisions? I mean, how do you decompress?
I will be honest. I don't know if I decompress as well as I should. And that goes back to me just creating more of that space to kind of cater to my own mental health and well-being. But to know me is to know I'm a pretty jovial person, lighthearted person. So I think the times I am able to most decompress, I'm either traveling. I'm an avid traveler. So I try to sneak away and get away, whether it's locally or traveling somewhere away from the city, or just connecting with friends and just talking about not politics. So none of my friends are connected to politics. They don't want to talk about politics. And so it kind of allows you that opportunity to recharge and just be reconnected to everyday folk.
But one thing I will commend you on that I saw in the Board of Education campaign and the Ward 5 Council campaign, to that point, your friends may not be connected, but they showed up for you. They had the T-shirts on. They were out in front of the
most definitely,
stations, right?
Most definitely.
And I think for a lot of young people aspiring to run, what I've noticed, which is unfortunate, is that they live two different lives, where they are over here in the political world by themselves, and then they go back and they convene with their friends, but their friends are not coming over to support. And I think that plays a factor in like the outcomes too.
That's real.
Right?
That's real.
So I saw that in both of your campaigns, which I acknowledge and appreciate it. Because a lot of these young people think they have to turn on a different switch to be in this space. No, bring your friends with you.
Yeah.
I
Bring them
think
along.
it's just selling the vision. Like, this is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it, and I need
Yeah.
your help to help me get there. I just genuinely believe most people, if they can buy into your vision, will tend to support something that is for a good cause, or they think it's for a good cause.
Yeah, but I think Sai alluded to this earlier though, and it's just real. This ain't even like patting you on the back, but it's true. I mean, come on, man. People say a lot in this town.
Yes.
It has to be something about that person that make a person say, okay,
Yeah, I'm with it. Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, that's just flat out. And you know, whether it's what you've done already.
I mean,
you know what I mean?
again, I
that's
don't know what it.
important.
Maybe I should ask the people around me, but I tend to think I'm pretty authentic, better or worse, and I think people know if Zach is saying this, he's serious about it. This isn't just something he woke up and wanted to do, but it's really because he thinks he can make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one is and for people that, you know,
It's funny. It made me think. So during the campaign, I don't even know how to describe it. During the campaign for council, I had this whole, as some people described it, coming out moment. And it really, for me, wasn't that, because I've lived pretty authentically for a long time. But it was, I did not want to get elected, if I were to get elected, and people not know the whole me, or this
Right.
part that I haven't quite hid, but I haven't been outspoken about. So again, I just think, like, when you lead,
what is that? Let me ask you this
Yeah.
on that though. So, but do you think that was because people think that if somebody's if I'm gay, I should just come out and like sell that as a political tool? Do you
Yeah.
think that's what? Okay.
well, no, I'm not agreeing with you.
No, I'm not. I'm not even making that statement. I'm asking, do you think that's why people felt like it was a coming out moment, because if you're gay, you should say it and use it as a political tool?
I'll say a few things. I don't love the term coming out. I think it's problematic because it reinforces this idea that it's my responsibility to kind of garner your acceptance about who I am.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing him say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
And so
Yeah.
I rejected the term. I think it was the term that the media latched onto because this was my first time publicly saying it. I jokingly say with my friends, like, I've been gay a long time. And so I, the whole time I was on the school board, and people knew who knew me knew, but I had never publicly said it because, to your point, there was no reason for me to say it related to my work. But I knew that this was a different ball game, a different responsibility. I also knew that there were members of the community that need and want a champion. And here I am, maybe having opportunity to represent the ward on the council. I just felt a responsibility to publicly say it, not as a coming out, but as an opportunity to invite neighbors into who I am.
And
fully.
I tell you, man, we ran down the list of your predecessors in a previous time. Ward 5 was a lot different in terms of how they viewed that too. And it's not honestly very much different.
I had campaign team members that said I was going to lose the election.
Yeah.
Oh, most definitely. The team was split. There were advisors that said, don't do it. Say it after it. Kind of like what they're saying about Joe Biden. Just kind of win the election and then step back. Just get past the election. But I just refused to do that. And I just, again, call me naive. I just think people are bigger and better. And I hear what you're saying because it was a different time. I also think we're in a different day and time that most families and most people are connected to someone in the LGBTQ community in some way. And whether or not you agree with it or not, hopefully you could see my humanity. And I think I also benefited from the fact that people kind of knew me. They knew the work that I had led, and this was just another part of who I am. It wasn't what I was running on per se.
I think that took courage, because some people would have felt like they were in DC where you probably got 10% of our population, right, that identify as
That's
LGBT.
significant.
Yeah, that's a significant.
That's a
so
significant
for some
population.
people running for office, that's what I was saying. Like, I think it took courage not to, like,
Yeah.
treat it as some sort of tool that you could use to get votes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For real. I think it took courage to do the opposite. You know what I mean? Because this is DC has again 10% of its population identifies.
There were campaign team members that thought that was going to cost me the election, and even afterwards, they thought it costed me the election.
Yeah.
And I think your approach when I recalled a video on Twitter, it was like, this is what it is. We're moving forward. It wasn't a whole
Yeah, it
like
ain't gonna be about
we're gonna
this.
sit here and just
That's right.
do
That's
a
right.
25-minute video. Nah, this is what it is.
That's
You know.
right. And the crazy part about it is, the crazy part about it is that I've lived most of my life as a gay man, and now I'm on the council having to represent a community that I'm still learning about.
But is that fair
that
to you
makes
though?
sense.
Is that fair to you? Because I would imagine that
I think it happens.
if people that are like known for being LGBTQ advocates, right?
Yes.
Not the community as a whole, but like that hyper sort of like active groups within the community. Do they feel like, okay, you got to stand up for them in every situation, even if it's directly or
I
indirectly?
don't know if that's a spoken expectation.
Okay.
But again, I do think there's a responsibility, and it's something I want to do. Like now that I've shared this part of me, I feel like I need to take up space in this way.
Got you. Okay.
Especially when you're the only openly gay member on the council. And so it's just important. And when we talk about legislation, there was a number of investments in the LGBTQ community this year that was unmatched in previous years, and I think that's in part because now you have a gay member on the council that's saying, "Hey, don't forget about these people over there,"
sure.
and that has
Matters.
a role to play. But what I was getting at is, as a gay black elected official is different than being a white gay elected official. And just like any other community, those tensions exist. Yeah. And in this city, you still have parties where this is where the black gays go hang out, and this is where everybody else goes to hang out. And it just keeps coming back to that same theme across the city and in the ward. And I just keep coming back to my role as a bridge builder across differences, because at the end of the day, I just am fully persuaded that we want the same things.
Nah, I believe that.
For more or less.
And so on that note,
yes,
Councilmember Parker, look, we want to see you more vocal about the LGBTQ return to citizen. No,
yeah.
But no, but that in this work, right? I've never been homophobic or anything, right? Growing up, but none of that, right? I wasn't raised that way, right? From people, my neighbor, my little homies, you know what I'm saying? My little cousins, whatever, right? You know what I'm saying? I always been somebody that I don't like to see nobody taken advantage of, disrespected, blah, blah, blah. That's how I was raised. But when I got into work, from working with youth initially and having, young girl up when I was up 7, up KDP, talking about coming out, like come out to me, right? I'm like, damn, I don't even know what to do with that, right? I don't even know what to say back to her, to working when I was at Project Empowerment and having we did a special class with the mayor's office on back then it was just gay, lesbian, transgender affairs back then. Back early 2000s, and having not only trans folks and gay men and then trans females in my class, but then as a job coach, I was tasked with job coaching them at a transitional house focused on the LGBTQ community, right? As a young man, I'm like 25. She just opened my eyes up, and and then on the return, having people in the reentry space, so many people that came home, and and because of their lifestyle choices, right? People only saw them for being LGBTQ, but like not seeing them as in the same way as like every other returning citizen, right? But they, in terms of barriers, in terms of what they were trying to do, housing, employment, all of that stuff, they were running into the same issues, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just, you know, it's interesting. My work has really helped me grow as a man in my, not just my worldview, but like my understanding of like what people are up against, you know what I'm saying? And then in our own little way, being able to like push back on, and or even educate and help others grow.
That's
you know,
right.
you know what I'm saying? Like
That's
I
very
think it's important, man. I think that's super important.
Especially with our young people, I say all the time, homophobia is nothing but fear, and like represented in different fashions. And I know it is rampant in society, but I'm also just concerned with the level of homophobia in young people, and they're learning and hearing things at a young age that just kind of manifests itself later in life. But to your point, whether you're a gay returning citizen or a straight returning citizen or something else, like you all still have that shared reality and probably have some of the same challenges. And so once people get past that, and we have come a long way. I don't want it to make it seem like the city or the country is where it was 10, 20 years ago. But I know there's still a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
Well, now we appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
It has been a pleasure to have you come in and sit with us and talk to us and give us some of your time. Again, knowing that you're a year and a half in, there's a lot of demand on your schedule. So for you to sit with us.
Can I ask a question before we go?
You can.
For both of you all, as Ward 5 neighbors, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, like, what is your hope for the ward?
Man, that's a heavy question. My hope for the ward is we are in a ward that all people can thrive. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's super important, and thriving, you know, will be different for different people, but a ward that is, you know, void of poverty and crime, and where people are just, you know what I mean, living amongst each other, healthy and well, you know. And I think that where our children can play outside and we feel comfortable. Yeah.
My dream or vision for the ward, I think there's like 18, 19 communities in Ward 5, right? I want each of them to be clearly defined, but the definition is a group effort by all the people that live in those neighborhoods, right? When I was growing up, like Michigan Park was different than Brookland, even though it was right next to each other. Edgewood was different than Brookland, even though it was right next to each other, right? Truxton Circle, you could feel the flavor when you went from community to community, right?
And that y'all include Truxton Circle, man. We're part of Ward 5, man. I'm sorry.
So Langston, and I think it still exists.
So wait, you consider where you live Truxton Circle?
They do.
Okay.
And so for me,
that's surprising to hear you say that.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought you were going to say Hanover.
Nah, I know. That's what I'm saying. I think since we talking, you know, y'all political talk.
But see, for me, I grew up on 6th and Franklin. Some people called it Brookland. Some people called it Edgewood, right? So I just think those clear definitions add to the character of the ward, and
everybody nowadays lives in Brooklyn
or Capitol Hill.
No matter where you
live.
No matter where you live. Oh, I live in Brooklyn.
Right? Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about tradition and how we define those neighborhoods. And we talked a bit about the legacy things we want to keep going. And to me, that's one of the things when you know you're in certain neighborhoods, it's defined by certain characteristics, whether it be physical or just a feeling. So for me, it's like my daughter's growing up in Ward 5. I want her to understand that 20 years from now.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing for me, defining it, but it's a democratic process for defining it.
It's funny you say that because we have a senior advisory committee, and one of the members who grew up in this city, that's her number one focus.
Okay.
And she's adamant that it's Shaw. It's not Truxton Circle. She would say this community is Shaw, and there's a lot of examples like that, whether it's Woodridge or...
I'm so glad you said that, bro, because for real, honestly, like, I never heard that in my life until I probably was like 36. Like, seriously, I mean, I knew people, but that's not what we, like, We would define our neighborhood. But that's Hanover. You know what I'm saying? And then my grandmother and them, like Shaw came down our way because remember, I don't know if it's still this way, but okay, remember New Jersey Avenue, when Dunbar was on New Jersey Avenue at one point separated Ward 2 and Ward 5, right? But people consider all the way down to North Capitol, right, between N and P Street or N and Q, that still was a part of Shaw back in the day. Like when they grew up, they considered that because all that was black from there up to 9th Street. So they just consider all of that Shaw. The idea of Truxton Circle, I was in my late 30s when I started hearing that.
So
Sorry,
it gets back to there's a need to do that and not to forget the history and the legacies. Like right now, we're also naming streets after prominent black folk.
Oh yeah, shout out to you for that. I was getting Izzy from camp today, and I was on 2nd and Rhode Island, and I saw, I forgot the guy. It's a dude name, in the brown sign, and then when I got to 1st and Rhode Island, I saw
and I think
John
I saw it
something
today
or something
too.
like that.
I think I saw it today
I just
too.
was right there. Literally, I was just right there today, man.
And we're doing it all over the ward. So Jesse Mitchell, we have the unveiling on Thursday. We just had one for Dorothy Celeste Bolding Fairby. Like unsung heroes of dynamic, prolific black folk who lived in Ward 5 or had connections to the ward so that we can remember those legacies. And that's important for me as somebody that didn't grow up here, but I just recognize how much the city has changed. All right, one more question before we go.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have an important election coming up, national election. I don't want to get y'all too deep into politics, but I want to get you on the record.
Yeah.
Or just what is your... it concerns me the level of apathy I sense from a lot of people, namely young people, about the upcoming election. And I think older folk get what's at stake, but it just seems like a lot of young folk, I'm hearing everything from I'm not voting to there's no difference between the two candidates to, this issue is why I'm not going to vote for this candidate. Like, what would you suggest is needed for us to reach the masses so that we just don't return Trump to the White House? Because, I just don't know if people fully appreciate, especially young people, fully appreciate the stakes of this election.
So I think the landscape, so the place where they get their information is where you have to play the game, right?
Facts.
They're getting their information on Instagram, on TikTok, and I think the game is being played there a bit by like the powers that be that are trying to fight that Trump from resurging and being back in the office. But I also think, quite frankly, on both sides, in order to get the apathetic vote, the unengaged potential voter, to feel excited about this, we must address the fact that they're not going to turn a blind eye to things that are obvious. And there's some obvious things on both sides that people are trying to get folks
like
to
what?
not look at, right?
Like what?
So I think with respect to the left and the incumbent, people do see what appears to be health challenges, right? And if I'm not a super engaged voter and I'm just glancing at the TV, I may notice something, or I may at least have questions about it, right? And I feel like people that are in the inner circles are not even addressing the fact that I understand why you might think that way. And I think that if this were my first time voting and you're telling me to just bypass that.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm getting my info on TikTok and IG, so I'm seeing the funny memes. I'm seeing the GIFs. I'm seeing like the doctored videos.
No, I think you have a very valid point.
So it's like I can't look by that though. So we gotta like at least allow people to have questions and come up with some strong answers, because maybe there's nothing wrong, right? Maybe there's not. But can you at least reassure me of that? And I don't think there's enough of that happening right now.
I think, first of all, this is why you start talking to people prior to right now, right? We talked about rapport with the teachers, that example, but you start talking to this demographic early on. You start telling your story early on. There's a lot of wins that this administration has gotten that they don't talk about, or they don't talk about it in the right way. So now when you talk about it, yeah, of course you're talking about it now. That's how people feel,
That's how
right?
people- yeah.
I think that, and I totally agree with Sai in terms of where, these points of communication, and the reality of that is a natural thing. So people look to strength. They look at people who look stronger, right? I think it's also American arrogance that make us feel like things are always going to be okay. But this is not a simulation.
That is a
This
word.
is not a movie. This is not a commercial. It is real, right? And if this happens, and it's another thing, simultaneously we talking about, the election, but then you see what's been happening out of that court. You know what I mean? What's been happening out of the Supreme Court that's compounding how dangerous it's gonna be if
Yeah.
if the right wins. I mean, this is a
I just am really worried.
Yeah, same here.
It's reminiscent of 2016 in so many ways, where there was so much infighting, there were so many stories about the wrong stuff, and then we saw what ended up happening.
Because in our families, in black families, right, and it all starts with family, right? It blossoms out into in-person engagement like what we're doing right now. Our friends that we exclusively talk to on Twitter, our friends that we exclusively talk to on group chat. Like, we all have one thing in common. We come from black families, and in those black families, there have been times where we've been taught to just push things to the side and not address them. And this feels like that all over again for a lot of people.
It does feel like that.
You know what I mean? Like, don't talk about Uncle Johnny. Don't talk about Grandma Tina. Whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that, at least right now. And I think people have grown tired of that. And I think that to some degree, we got to reassure people that that's not the same thing replaying over again.
Yeah, and the stakes are even higher though. I think that's it's the point. I think people need to really understand, like really what's at
DC
stake.
home rule is really
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
chopping block.
Yeah.
I don't know if people really appreciate that.
Now this would be the thing though, right? Like I've been thinking about this a lot too, in the sense of like, okay, there's no way in hell, like we know what's gonna happen here, like he does, right? But when you start talking about the Milwaukees, the Atlantas, the Philadelphias, or Milwaukee, or Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, like them Ohio, them battleground joints, bro. Like, or even like a Virginia, to be honest, right? Like the telling of the story, I think, is never been as vital. And if you talking about specifically with black people, like I'm even telling them people ran on righting the wrongs around criminal justice reform, ain't did a thing. You know what I'm saying? And stuff like that. They're like, yo, you easy. You got the pen, clemency. These are the things that I just feel like. So what happens is then when you go in the hood and you start talking about student loan debt, right? When you start talking about the infrastructure bill that ideally would had set aside, or particularly with the black companies, so the black companies can hire black people, but like SBA loans and loans that opening up for returning citizen. So policy wise, right, there's some things that you could talk about. But when you asking that person in the hood, have they seen that? Have they felt that? People like, nah. And so I was at a dinner, right?
Or even going to the grocery store.
Right.
Everything is more expensive.
Okay.
And so
you see what I'm saying?
You know what I mean? To your point,
See,
we're seeing, the economy added X number of jobs, but my
people
day-to-day
not really
life,
like they didn't feel it.
I may not
I was so
necessarily
shocked that this
experience
wasn't
that.
even like these people who were, college educated folks, we were at a table and I raised a question about, did anybody get debt relief? Right? So instead of it was 7 of us, like 4 or 5 of them raised their hand. But they was talking about, I was like, how you think that happened? It's amazing too how sometimes people don't associate something with the person. They did not, they like it all kind of paused. Like, I'm like, yeah, how do you, like, what do you think that is? You think Trump did that? Like, no, he didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't see that.
But we also need more ambassadors like y'all to go and kind of talk and relate a message.
Yeah.
Because Biden can't do it alone. And That's just my plug.
Yeah, I agree, man. But I think I don't. I will say this on the record, as you said. I'm thinking, man, they could roll back the 13th Amendment, like that. Like this is real. And even if you look at, I mean, Sotomayor ain't no spring chicken. I mean, we got Ketanji there. What's the other? What's her name? Kagan, right? Elena Kagan. Like, them people ain't no spring chicken. I mean, they might just say, you know what, I'm retiring. Bro, could you imagine like an 8-1 conservative court?
Crazy. Finished.
But it is a possibility.
What a Donald Trump is president.
That's what I mean.
That's
and that would be crazy. That would mean he potentially, that would be 5 Supreme Court justices that he would appoint. I'm just saying hypothetically if that happened.
But
bro.
Again,
That's
I don't know if the average person is even thinking about it.
They not though.
In that level.
But that's why school is important. That's why we gotta bring civics back to school. People just don't even understand how things work too. I think that plays a big part into how people think about these elections.
And that's not just that is not defined by socioeconomic status either. Because there are people that are making $200,000 that can't name their council member. They don't know what ward they live in.
That's right.
It's real.
Bro,
I was one of those people.
In America,
That goes back to my story. Like, I knew nothing about DC politics, and now look. So again, I just think there's a lot of potential in this city, but also to reach a lot of people.
Yeah, but in America, again, we've since its inception, right, and definitely in our lifetime, things have always worked themselves out, right. But what January 6th told us, we're no longer in that time. That has been really brushed under the rug, bro. Listen, we've always had a smooth transition of power in our government since we've existed. We talked about this back in March, but the idea that somebody pressed upon that, like somebody tried not to do that, that's what happened. And now that person is potentially going to be the president of the United States, bro.
And now that person is telling you what you saw didn't really happen.
Yes.
Didn't really
That reminds me of the Ta-Nehisi Coates article about him being the first white president.
First white president. He had a whole editorial.
And he represents really what whiteness is for the first time before any of the other presidents, right? It's a very good thing to revisit in this time and read it again.
100%.
He gives license to people's worst impulses.
That's a great way to put it.
Yes.
It's a great way to put it.
Yes.
No, but I appreciate you raising those questions, though.
Yeah, man.
Kendrick or Drake? Promise. Last one.
In what way? In the battle or overall? See, the battle. I don't think it's even a question in the battle at this point.
Okay,
that's conniving. That's my joke. That's my joke. In the battle, so, I know what he gonna say though. Yeah.
I'm not in the majority. I'm not. We could probably see it for a while.
So you think Drake won that battle?
I think as far as like just rapping, yeah.
You're losing viewers.
You're losing
viewers.
Yeah, I probably will. But I just think
we've been going the battle with that concert in the video. I just think it's just, you know what I'm saying. But Drake is what I'm not a fan of is for anybody that thinks he's not still him. It's crazy. You know what I'm saying? As an artist, he's a big deal. You're not gonna change that. That's all people acting as if like, come on, man, he's too talented to not, he's who he is.
But Kendrick won that battle.
He won that
hands down.
He won
hands
down.
down.
It's like, I think what happens is that, I mean, it's the same thing in politics, right? At a certain point, people just, the wave just goes a different way. Yeah. And people, I'll tell you this, I knew before they got to releasing records, I knew that this wasn't going to be favorable for him. I knew it beforehand.
And how did you know that?
Because I saw the writing on the wall from the reviews of the last project and some of the comments on Twitter about where he was psychologically and how he was shifting from the person they once knew him as an artist. So once that happened and then that first verse came out, I was like, yeah, when this drops,
can I add this though?
Go ahead.
Too. See, man, they ain't been talking about this enough too. Like my dog don't leave that battle out.
Oh yeah, push it.
Like he wounded him, like for real.
Yeah.
To be honest, nobody been talking about that, but it's like that he Pusha, which pushes him and Pusha going back and forth. I think Drake was seen in a lot of ways at that point as being like literally invincible, particularly coming off the Meek situation.
Yeah.
And with the Meek situation, I think he's benefiting, or Kendrick benefited from what he benefited from in the him versus Meek battle. Like, people root for who
The connectivity.
yeah, and be considered who's considered like the underdog. You understand what I'm saying? And not underdog as a as an artist, but when we start talking about like popularity, you know what I'm saying? Drake's like a pop star, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Drake is a pop star.
He's a pop star. He's Michael Jackson for real. You know what I'm saying? And that like, I don't mean that in a literal sense, but meaning his range, right? He's there. You know what I'm saying? He on that Beyonce, you know, he that. So I think what Kendrick was able to do, what Push was able to do, was remove some of that allure. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And I think
That's right.
Kendrick came in and finished the job.
Yeah, it's just, I think what I think about on a larger level though is that it makes you wonder after this though, are there any other Titans that are even coming along?
Yeah, but you asked that question
as if they
gone though.
No.
I don't think they leaving.
But time is undefeated,
Yeah,
right? You talking about a person like Kendrick who doesn't come outside that much anyway,
And
right?
rap is absolutely a young man's genre.
It's a young man's genre, and like I can imagine he's probably exhausted the amount of attention that he's getting right now. And a guy like Drake, the reason why I also felt like the writing was on the wall, because he said that he was going to take a break like 3 times, and then he said it twice in the disses, and people only listened to the second time he said it. But he said it before in another diss, like, I'm about to be done with this. I'm not going back and forth too much. So I think that wore him down. I think Kendrick's not a person that's normally going back and forth like this. So to that point, though, they're over 35.
Yeah.
Do we have a Titan? And I'm not just to his point with the questions earlier, I'm not just talking about music and dancing, right? Who are young black people that have a voice that is emerging and going up with that voice, right?
I don't know.
That's what I was getting at when we talked offline about this. Like, I respect Kendrick and Drake's level now, but like, they can't keep this level of productivity 10 years from now. Yeah. Would they want to? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Maybe not at this level, but I don't think they're going anywhere.
Yeah.
Anytime soon. But to your point, like, who are the up and coming artists and stars that are going to replace them?
Yeah.
I mean, that's to be seen.
We will see.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me.
Nah, thank you for being with us.
This is great.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
As always, Heart of the City, great conversations, great people, and hopefully some great takeaways for you all as listeners. So keep watching, keep coming to the YouTube page, and
I'm gonna be here 10 years from now too. Just by yeah,
I hope I'm here 10 years from now.
We can't talk like that. We gonna keep producing. We gonna be here, Joe. Yeah, man. Come on, man. We gonna be here, man.
we gonna be here.
Yeah, for sure.
Heart of the City, one love.
Heart of the City. Peace.